In the running game, people can discount Indiana's defense, their rush defense, but going into the game, 31st in the country, top 5 or 6 in the Big Ten. They've played Michigan, they've played Penn State, so they've played capable or elite rushing attacks. So I think the rushing progress was meaningful, Tony.
Yeah. And going into the past couple of games, after Ohio State played Iowa and Penn State, it got to the point where I felt, and I said, like, no matter whatever they do from here on out is meaningless, because running for a bunch of yards against Indiana or Maryland won't convince me that they can't be stopped again. However, it was good to see what they did against Indiana, and Indiana has held teams to some of their lowest points. Cincinnati, they held to 40 yards rushing. Michigan, they held to the season low of 165 yards rushing. Now, that was the same game that Mike Hart went down with a seizure, so you can certainly excuse some of that lackluster performance. But the Buckeyes were able to do it inside and outside, and it was an impressive way that they did it, and the big plays helped, obviously. And now, as you look at it, and you look at their season rushing totals, from week to week, and you see this, 280, 81, 258, 252, 237, and then it's 66 and 98, and then it's back to 207 against Northwestern, and then it's 340 against Indiana. The outliers are the Iowa and Penn State game. So can you base the entire running game on the fact that they were stopped by 2 teams when those are clearly outliers? But it also shows you what is possible, and because it's happened. And so does that mean they're going to run the ball against Maryland? And they should run the ball. It still just comes down to they have to run it against Michigan, and Michigan and teams of Penn State and Iowa have shown that you can shut down Ohio State's running game. So it's a question where, does CJ Stroud get more involved against Michigan? Probably, and that helps. But you look at the total of what they've done this season, they've run the ball very well. I believe they're averaging more yards per carry than Michigan. But you have those 2 games in there which throw just everything, doubt into everything. And then, of course, last year's Michigan game, which Ohio State is a much different team, but it's impossible to ignore what happened last year. So I think you got those 3 games, the 2 games that they couldn't run in last year's game, just clouding over everything, and it should.
Anything on the run game, Steve? You're muted.
I was muted. I think that last week was certainly a great step in the right direction, but again, it was Indiana, so you kind of have to, take that and tear it in half and throw both halves away. I think you got to continue to hammer it. I think you got to continue to work on it, whether it's Mayan Williams or Travion Henderson or whoever answers the call this week. I think it's something that you got to continue to do. And moreover, I think Xavier Johnson is showing you that he's a guy that needs to have the football in his hands. I mean, we can stigmatize him all we want as the former walk-on, but, when a guy rips off a 71-yard run and makes a play like he did, they need to figure out creative ways to get him the ball in the open field, because that cat can make some things happen and make some guys miss. And, obviously they're getting along just fine. They're 10-0, but you're always looking for new and different ways to attack opposing defenses. So I think that's a guy right there that, if you can have somebody added to the equation this late in the season, I think that's an area you can say running it, throwing him the screen passes and the swing passes out of the backfield, or just lining him up at wide receiver and having him run patterns. I think he deserves to have, X number of touches a game. If it's at running back, it should be 12. If it's at running back and wide receiver, 15. That guy deserves to have a few touches, I think.
For me, the big thing on the running game is more about short yardage, 3rd and short, 4th and short. Yes, you need to be able to show that you can run whenever. And I think that Ohio State, in large part, has been able to run in those, in those bigger situations. I mean, we can kind of debate when they start a series off and they run on 1st and 10 and get 2 yards, and then they're already kind of behind the chains at 2nd and 8. But the maddening situation of how they've not been able to convert the shorties is, I think, probably the biggest and most problematic thing, especially going into the Michigan game, because that's going to be somewhere that Michigan's really going to try and make its hay, is stopping Ohio State on those short drives. And Ryan Day is just going to get more and more frustrated with it. And you're going to see him, 4-down territory, moving from in between field goal and punt range to minus territory at that point. And you can't be doing that kind of stuff. So, it's got to be a situation of where not only do they show consistency in the run game, but they show success. I mean, just any success in the short yardage scenarios, because that's been the most problematic thing to me. I mean, okay, we can go in and we can look at, yes, Penn State did this to them and so on and so forth. And that's, it's real. I mean, you can't look past it and say, well, it was just a bad game or whatever. But week in and week out, as of late, the short yardage stuff has been gross.